morning. Our first reading is from Psalm 130. Out of the depths I cry to you, O Lord. Lord, hear my voice. Let your ears be attentive to the voice of my supplications. If you, O Lord, should mark iniquities, Lord, who could stand? But there is forgiveness with you, so that you may be revered. I wait for the Lord. My soul waits, and in his word I hope. My soul waits for the Lord, more than those who watch for the morning. More than those who watch for the morning. O Israel, hope in the Lord. For those with the Lord there is steadfast love, and with him is a great power to redeem. It is he who will redeem Israel from all its iniquities. That ends our first reading. Please stand as you are able if gospel is to be read, while the gospel is read. Our gospel reading today is from John chapter 11, verses 17 through 27, and verses 32 through 44. When Jesus arrived, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, some 2 miles away, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them about their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went down to meet him, while Mary stayed at home. Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that God will give you whatever you ask of him." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha said to him, "I know that he will rise again in the resurrection of the last day." And Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this?" She said to him, "Yes, Lord, I believe you, that you're the Messiah, the Son of God, the one coming into the world." When Mary came where Jesus was and saw him, she knelt at his feet. And she said to him, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her also weeping, he was greatly disturbed in spirit and deeply moved. He said, "Where have you laid him?" They said to him, "Lord, come and see." And Jesus began to weep. So the Jews said, "See how he loved him." But some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?" Then Jesus, again greatly disturbed, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and the stone was lying against it. Jesus said, "Take away the stone, Martha." The sister of the dead man said to him, "Lord, already there is a stench. He's been dead for 4 days." Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. Jesus looked upward. He said, "Father, I thank you for having heard me. I knew that you would always hear me, but I have said this for the sake of the crowd standing here, so they may believe that you sent me." When he had said this, he cried out with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out!" The dead man came out. His hands and feet were bound with strips of cloth. His face was wrapped in a cloth, and Jesus said to him, "Unbind him and let him go." That ends today's readings.
So thank you for your attendance this morning. It means a lot to me to be able to look out and see friends and know that I'm amongst those who support me most. So it means a lot. Thank you. And for those of you who are here on Zoom, I hope that you're able to truly enjoy the morning and and maybe even enjoy a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, and this message. This is a really interesting message to give because I've heard this story just like you for many years, and it's always been one that it's difficult. It's not an easy story because how does it apply, right? Are we to believe that that if we die we're going to suddenly be brought out and to our family? That's not the message. I don't think the message is that at all. In fact, what I think the message really is, it's a number of things. Now, I'll start by saying I'm a little off script, and I'm probably already robbed you of 35 seconds of your time, but I'm going to keep going. This is a message about spiritual death and about resurrection from that spiritual death. But then the important part that really applies to us, which is the unbinding. It's a story about the Lenten season. It's a buildup of what's about to come. And it's a story of all of the miracles. Last week, Pastor Larry gave her sermon on John chapter 9. And this is when Jesus opened a man's eyes, but not just restoring his eyesight, but giving him insight. This week, our gospel opens with Martha going out to meet Jesus as he arrives in Bethany just outside of Jerusalem. It's the very place that the Pharisees are expecting to arrest Jesus. His disciples had warned him, do not go. Yet he does, and when he arrives, Martha greets him with the words that we all know so well. Lord, if you had been here. We know what it feels like to say that. Lord, if you had been here, that diagnosis wouldn't have come. If you had been here, the relationship might have survived. I can make this very personal. Lord, if you had been here, my job wouldn't have fallen apart. Lord, if you'd been here, my depression wouldn't feel so heavy. If you'd been here, my dream wouldn't have died. But they're not just ancient words from Mary and Martha. These are the words that are our words. They rise from places in us where our hope feels delayed, where God is distant, where it feels like life is slipping from our hands, our spiritual death. And because Jesus knows these words so well, the gospel gives us two stories in John 9 and John 11, back to back, that speak directly to our deepest fears. One story is about blindness. One story is about death. One story is about seeing, but the other is about living. In John 9, Jesus heals a man who was born blind. I've shared this before. As a scientist, I continually try to analyze and understand the world with science. So this week I was listening to a neurologist who talked about eyesight and the way that we see. We don't see with our eyes. We perceive light. They're just a sensor, just like your tongue is a sensor for taste. It's your brain, right? Your brain that interprets, gives context, creates meaning to the light that's coming in. In John 9, it's not just about eyesight. It's about insight. Jesus is healing the man's physical sight, yeah, but he's also healing this man's insight. He's healing the man's perception and understanding and his ability to understand who Jesus is. It's healing the spirit just as much as it's healing the eyes. And once Jesus opens our eyes in John 9, he goes even deeper in John 11. He doesn't just open eyes, he opens a grave. He doesn't just restore sight, but he restores life. So where John 9 opens our eyes, John 11 opens the grave. So let's talk about this in the context of the coming couple weeks, where we celebrate Palm Sunday, then Holy Week and Easter. John records every sign that Jesus performs, and it reveals who Jesus really is. Every sign also increases the Pharisees' fear. When Jesus heals a man at the pool in John 5, the Pharisees accuse Jesus of breaking Sabbath. They begin plotting against him. When he feeds 5,000 in John 6, the crowds swell. Leaders grow uneasy. When John heals a man who was born blind in John 9, the Pharisees explode in anger. They interrogate this man. They reject the miracle. They expel the healed man from the synagogue. John 9 doesn't just open the man's eyes, it opens a Pharisee's determination to stop Jesus. By the time we reach John 11, Jesus isn't just performing these signs. He is literally walking straight into the danger of the Pharisees. And it's into this tension and danger, into this grief, that the words we all know so well, that Jesus walks straight into Bethany. Lord, if you had been here. When he arrives, Martha's the first to meet him, and she doesn't hold back. She doesn't pretend. She doesn't even sugarcoat the grief. She says exactly what she's thinking. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. It's an honest, raw, faithful statement. It's frustrated. It's also very reverent, because even in her grief, in her disappointment, in her confusion, she still begins with one word: Lord. She leads with trust before she leads with pain. She brings her heartbreak, but she brings it to the one she still calls Lord. And Jesus doesn't correct her emotions. He doesn't say, Martha, calm down. He doesn't say you shouldn't feel that way. He meets her right where she is. And then he gives her the heart of the gospel. He says, I am the resurrection and the life. Doesn't say, I will be, as if some future event will be the resurrection. No. He doesn't say, one day you'll see, but instead says, I am, right now, at this moment, in your grief, in your disappointment, in your unanswered questions. He doesn't just promise resurrection in the future, he brings it right now to the present. Her faith is not pretending everything is fine. Her faith is not putting on a brave face or acting as though the grief doesn't hurt. Faith is about bringing our truth to the one who is life itself. It's what Martha does. It's showing up with disappointment, being confused and angry and grief-ridden, and still calling Jesus Lord. It's trusting that Jesus can hold what we bring to him. Resurrection doesn't begin with certainty, it begins with honesty. Because it's not just Jesus raising Lazarus, it's Jesus hearing you in the depths, right where you said, Lord, if you had been here, and still calling you into a world full of hope. Mary comes next. She falls at Jesus' feet. She says the same words as Martha, Lord, if you had been here. But Jesus responds differently. With Martha, he teaches, but with Mary, he weeps. He is deeply moved and troubled in spirit. He breaks open with compassion. Before Jesus brings resurrection, he brings his tears. Before he calls out Lazarus, he enters into grief with those who loved him. This is not a Savior who is distant. This is a God whose hearts break with ours. A God who stands beside us in our depths and weeps with us before he works. He meets us in our depths before calling us out of them. So what happens next? Jesus goes to the tomb. Doesn't try to go around the tomb, doesn't try to sidestep it. He goes directly to it, and he stands right in front, and he says, take away the stone. Martha protests. She's a very practical person who's also grieving and also understands the smell of death. Lord, the stench. I think as this applies to us, it's not about the smell, the olfactory sense. This is about the shame, the hurt, the pain that we have with our spiritual death. Jesus insists, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" And then he prays, not for power, but for witness. "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe." Then he cries out with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The word that breaks death's hold, the word that reaches into the darkness and pulls life from the grave, Jesus isn't just comforting us in death, he's confronting it. And Lazarus comes out alive, but still wrapped, still bound, still carrying all the trappings of death. And Jesus turns to the community and says, "Unbind him and let him go." Jesus raises, the community unbinds. And this is where the story comes back to us. Because the places where we say, "Lord, if you had been here," are often the same places that we're all still wrapped. We're still bound. We're still carrying what feels to us like death. The diagnosis that changed everything, the relationship that didn't survive, the job that fell apart, the depression that feels very heavy, the dream that died before it ever really had a chance. The resurrection doesn't erase these stories. It meets us in those stories, in those times, and then it calls us out to them. But even when God brings us back to life, we still walk out of the tomb wrapped in something. Maybe the fear, the shame, maybe it's grief or regret, our old patterns, our old ways, or our old wounds. You'll notice in this story, Jesus didn't snap his fingers. He didn't clap his hands and make it all disappear. He turned to the people around Lazarus, to the community, and he says, "Help him, free him, walk with him." Because resurrection is instantaneous, but unbinding, that takes time. It takes people. It takes love. People that won't rush the process. And the truth is, every one of us is Lazarus at some point in our lives. Every one of us has walked out of something, still wrapped in something else. Every one of us is called to be part of someone else's unbinding, to sit with them in their grief, to listen to their disappointment, to help them loosen the grave clothes and feel and their fear of shame, to remind us that life is possible again. So Jesus raises, we unbind, and that's how resurrection becomes real in our community. That's how hope takes root. That's how the words, "Lord, if you had been there," become the very places where Jesus speaks life. So here's the good news. John 9, Jesus opens our eyes. In John 11, he opens our graves. The Pharisees feared it because it changed everything, and their fear eventually led to the cross. For us, their fear is our hope, because the God who hears our cry, the God who weeps with us, the God who speaks life into what we thought was lost, is still calling us into hope today. Amen.